Corporations. So really quick, before getting into all the details of this time period, we have to define what is a corporation. So the thing is, a corporation is an association of individuals that's basically legally authorized to act as a so-called fictional person, and thus it relieves its individual members of certain legal liabilities. But one big thing about a corporation that is really important for this time period is basically a corporation can raise capital by selling ownership shares or stock to people who don't have a direct role in running it. So this is the stock market basically. So when you buy stock in a company, you are a shareholder. Now the thing is, a shareholder benefits from the dividends and basically can profit from a corporation, because as the corporation thrives, its stock is worth more. And so you have invested, let's say you invested $10 for 2 stock, but as the corporation does better and now the stock is worth $6, you could sell it and you've made $2. This is great because what it really means is that shareholders are not personally liable for the debts of a corporation, and they only stand to lose what they've invested in it. And so you as a shareholder only lose if that business goes out of business, that corporation goes out of business, you only lose what you invested. They're not going to come after you and go, oh, well, you owe us more, and no. The other thing about this is that corporations can outlive its founders, which is really great for long-term planning, which is excellent because a lot of times, like if you've ever started a business, the first couple years of a business, you're not necessarily going to make a lot of money, or if any money. And so you want to be able to long-term invest in everything. We're going to see, though, corporations have a ripple effect on the economy because these corporations get bigger and they're going to build plants. They're going to merge with other companies. They're going to develop new technology. They're hiring workers. And all of these things that they have to do basically require huge amounts of capital. And so to get capital to invest, in their own corporation and everything, they're going to turn to banks. Well, the banks then are also going to get larger because they're going to loan this money to corporations. Corporations make the money, they're paying it back, and the banks have a lot more money. Also, we're going to see the actual work that laborers do is going to change. If you took 1301 with me or someone else, hopefully you made note of that a lot of the work that people did was artisans, typically native born, lowercase native, to the United States. But now we're seeing more and more these workers are unskilled or semi-skilled, a lot of times doing repetitive tasks for very low wages, and a lot of them are immigrants. The other thing is corporations are also going to stimulate urban growth. This is what we're talking about, this ripple effect. By 1900, it's about 90% of manufacturing occurs in cities. And so people move to the cities so that they can find work and everything. Now, there are, of course, exceptions to this, but you can see that this is still a huge amount of people. The thing is, during this time period when looking at the corporation, you have to understand vertical and horizontal integration. So I'm going to go through these, but these diagrams here are also meant to help with it. So vertical integration is basically consolidating all of the functions related to a particular industry, from extraction of the raw materials to the actual transport and manufacturing to the finished product. So a great example of this would be I knit. So it would be if I owned sheep, I sheared the sheep, I turned their wool into yarn, I knitted sweaters, and then I sold the sweaters. So I control every step of the process, basically, from distribution and sales included. What this means is, if I was doing that, my company would no longer be dependent on outside suppliers, and therefore this ends up cutting costs and cutting delays. When one corporation is working with another corporation, you have to wait on them and their timeline. Things might not match up nicely, but if you own all the steps, you're going to make sure it all works out. The thing is, This is only possible because of technology, because you're going to get geographical dispersal at this time. It's very unlikely where the raw materials are being grown or produced is the same place that you're manufacturing the finished product. Nobody would really like it if I had sheep in my backyard in downtown Fort Worth. So it's only possible because of transportation and communication developments. A great example of vertical integration you can see here is meat packing, and meat packing definitely practiced vertical integration during this time period. Now, horizontal integration is basically a merger of competitors within the same industry. So this is where you get monopolies or near monopolies. A great example of this during this time period would have been Rockefeller. Rockefeller used all kinds of tactics like threats, deceit, price wars to basically acquire most of his competitors when it came to the oil industry. So Rockefeller owned Standard Oil. Standard Oil controlled about 90% of the nation's oil refinery by 1890. And the thing is, he didn't just practice horizontal integration, he also practiced vertical integration because he owned the oil fields, the pipelines, the refineries, and everything. This is kind of broken when you get the discovery of basically oil on like Spindletop Hill and in Texas and Oklahoma, and that's when you get things like Texas Oil Company is made, otherwise known as Texaco, and Gulf Oil. The thing is, these broke Rockefeller's near monopoly. Other examples of these near monopolies at this time would be things like James B. Dukes. He owned tobacco. He was basically the owner of tobacco in especially the South. Andrew Carnegie. He's going to consolidate much of America's steel industry. He owned about 1/4 of the country's steel in 1900. And you also have to keep in mind how those industries then affect other industries. That's the thing. With these three, you can see Rockefeller with oil, Carnegie to the far right with steel, and then in the middle you see James B. Duke with tobacco. The thing is, you're seeing a huge concentration of industry in the hands of very few people. And this is really concerning to a lot of people because what this means is they could set prices rather than go by supply and demand. They also have a lot of capital, so they could influence politicians. And in these ways, they could really threaten to restrict the opportunities for like small entrepreneurs like shopkeepers and farmers and artisans. The thing is, corporations overall are really changing Americans' lives. People are moving to cities to go work for these corporations. They're purchasing goods that didn't exist before the Civil War, or if they did exist before the Civil War, they might have been a lot more limited. We're seeing a whole new environment where we are seeing a new change in the relationship between labor and management. And we're seeing all kinds of new consumption patterns for people's lives and new patterns when it comes to like work and leisure. And you saw that a little bit with like technology in the last video. And so really, a lot of people say this is the time period that you're seeing modern America. Because hopefully it's a little easier to envision yourself living in this America than it was pre-Civil War. So I ask you this question. Looking at this so far, did corporations help society or hurt society more? And this is a pure opinion question. You could say one way or another, but I want you to think about it.